I'd been at that desk for 12 years. Same chair, same window, same chipped coffee mug with the faded company logo. The kind where the print has worn away from years of dishwasher abuse, but you still keep it because, well, it's yours. I used to come in before everyone else, not because I was particularly ambitious, but because I liked the quiet. I liked the way the building felt before it woke up that low. Electric hum from the air vents, the faint smell of paper and printer, ink the squeak of my shoes on the freshly mopped floor. In those moments, it almost felt like the office belonged to me. I'd sit down, fire up the computer, and watch the monitor glow to life in the dark. It was comforting, predictable, like the warm weight of a blanket you've had since you were a kid. You don't think about replacing it. You don't question whether you still need it. It's just there every day, unfolded like clockwork. Emails first, coffee refill at 9:15 sharp. Lunch at the same cafe around the corner where the cashier knew my order before I said a word. Afternoon slump at 3 o'clock where I'd sneak a cookie. From the break room, the oatmeal raisin kind that everyone pretended to hate. But somehow they always disappeared. People would joke that I was part of the furniture. I'd laugh along, pretending it didn't sound like a warning. Back then, I wore that phrase like a badge of honor. Part of the furniture meant reliable, safe, untouchable. Looking back now, I see it differently. Furniture doesn't get promoted. Furniture doesn't get thanked. It just sits there until one day someone decides it doesn't match the room anymore. But in those days, I didn't see the trap. I didn't see the little signs that the world was shifting beneath me. I thought the sameness was a shield. 12 years meant something. If I'd known what was coming, if I would have looked at that mug, that desk, that comfortable little life of mine, and realized how fragile it all really was. But I didn't. And for a while, that ignorance felt like peace. It started so small, I almost missed it. An email thread, one I should have been on, popped up in conversation during a Monday morning meeting. Something about a new project. In my department. But the plans had already been made without me. I laughed it off in the moment. Guess I'm not invited to the cool kids' table anymore, I joked, even though no one laughed back. They just shifted in their seats and moved on. It was such a tiny thing. But you know that feeling when you notice a hairline crack in a glass? You can't unsee it. Suddenly, you're hyper-aware of how fragile it really is. That week, I started paying attention, not in a paranoid way at least, not yet. Just noticing things. The closed-door meetings that happened a little more often. The way conversations would stop the second I walked into the break room. People who used to make eye contact now suddenly found something fascinating on the floor. One afternoon, I caught my manager, in the hallway with the VP. They were speaking in low voices, leaning in close. As soon as they saw me, they straightened up, smiled a little too wide, and changed the subject to the weather. I told myself I was overthinking it. 12 years here. I was solid, reliable. Not exactly CEO material, sure, but too embedded to just vanish. That's what I told myself. But that night, lying in bed, I replayed those moments over and over. And in the dark, it didn't feel like overthinking. It felt like recognition. I remembered a time years ago when a coworker disappeared almost overnight. We all acted like it was sudden, but now I realized there had been signs. I just hadn't cared enough to notice then. I cared now. The truth was, I could feel something shifting. And once you start feeling that shift, the ground never feels steady again. Once you start looking for something, you find it everywhere. It wasn't just the closed doors anymore. It was the whispers in the hallway, the way emails started arriving later than usual, or sometimes not at all. My workload, the one I'd always complained was too heavy, started to quietly shrink. Files I'd normally review were sent to someone else. Meetings I used to lead were suddenly handled without me. At first I thought, well, this is nice. Less stress. But that's the thing about less work in an office. It's rarely a gift. Began keeping a notebook in my drawer. It wasn't for work. It was for patterns, dates, times, the odd, almost invisible shifts that no one would notice unless they were paying attention. And I was paying attention now. The pages started to fill up. February 4th project reassigned without explanation. February 11th, excluded from Q1 strategy meeting. February 18th, overheard my name in the conference room. Door shut. Never been this paranoid before, but there was something about the air now. Thicker, heavier, like the room right before a storm breaks. Even the way people looked at me was different. There was this flicker in their eyes, like they knew something. One morning, I passed two coworkers near the elevator. They stopped talking as soon as they saw me, but one of them had this guilty half-smile, the kind you give when you've just been caught gossiping. I wanted to ask, "Is it me?" But I didn't. I just pretended not to notice, even as my stomach twisted at night. I found myself lying awake, replaying the day in my head like surveillance footage. I'd zoom in on moments, a glance, a pause, a tone of voice searching for proof of something I couldn't quite name yet. And every time, I thought I was being dramatic. I'd remember the last time I ignored my gut. Years ago, a friend had been quietly slipping away from me. Less calls, fewer invites, and I told myself it was just life getting busy. Till one day I found out she'd been talking about me behind my back for months. I'd been the last to know. I wasn't going to be the last to know this time. It came out of nowhere, or at least that's how it was supposed to feel. My manager, Rob, popped his head over my cubicle wall one morning, all smiles. "Hey, want to grab lunch today?" My treat. Rob hadn't invited me to lunch in, 5 years. And the last time he did, it was because the coffee machine was broken and he needed someone to complain with. "Sure," I said, forcing my voice to sound casual. Inside, I felt my stomach tighten. Nobody offers a free lunch without a reason, especially not in corporate. We went to this little Italian place 2 blocks away. I'd been there before, but that day the lighting felt dimmer, heavier. We sat in a booth by the window. I remember the condensation sliding down my glass of water, the faint clink of silverware from other tables, and the smell of garlic hanging in the air. Rob made small talk, too much small talk, asking about my weekend, my family, even the weather. It felt like he was circling something, waiting for the right moment to land. Halfway through my pasta, I caught it. The look. That mix of pity and awkwardness, like a doctor about to deliver bad news but still hoping you'll make it easier for them. "You've been such a steady presence here," he said, smiling in that way people do when they're trying to pad the blow. I twirled my fork slowly, the spaghetti slipping back onto the plate. "You're not buying me pasta, Rob," I thought. "You're buying time." Out loud, I just nodded. "Thanks." The conversation drifted back to neutral topics, but my mind wasn't there anymore. I was running through possibilities. Were they cutting my department? Downsizing the team? Or was it just me? When the bill came, he paid without hesitation, still smiling like this was some casual catch-up. But as we walked back to the office, his steps felt slower, heavier. I could feel the unspoken words hanging between us, as tangible as the winter air hitting my face. By the time we reached the building, I knew one thing for sure. That lunch wasn't about friendship. It was the prelude, the soft knock before the door slammed shut. It was later than I usually stayed. Most of the office had already cleared out, leaving that eerie quiet where the hum of the lights seems louder than normal. I was wrapping up some reports when the notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Subject: meeting tomorrow, urgent, 5 words. No greeting, no details. Just a time, 9 a.m., and the name of the conference room. I didn't even need to open it. I knew. There's a certain tone to emails like that. Short, clipped, efficient. The kind of efficiency that says, "We don't need to talk about this over email. You'll hear it in person." I sat there, staring at the subject line, my hand frozen on the mouse. And the strangest thing was, I didn't feel panic. Not at first. I felt calm, cold even. Like something in me had already been preparing for this moment, waiting for the official signal. I closed my laptop slowly, almost ceremonially, and just sat there in the dim light of my cubicle. The carpet smelled faintly of the industrial cleaner they used at night. Down the hall, I could hear the janitor's cart rolling, the wheels squeaking every few seconds. In my head, I pictured the meeting. The polite nods, corporate vocabulary, realignment, tough decisions, unfortunate circumstances. I could almost hear Rob saying them. I could see his hands folded on the table, his face doing that awkward half smile like he was trying to apologize without actually saying the word. There was no point rehearsing what I'd say. This wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be an announcement. When I got home that night, I didn't tell anyone about the email. I made dinner, washed the dishes, sat on the couch in the glow of the TV, but my mind kept flicking back to that. Subject line, it was like having a ticking clock in the back of my head. You can go about your business, but every second you hear it. I went to bed early, but sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the conference room table, the chairs, the manila folder with my name on it. By morning, I wasn't just expecting it, so I was ready for it. The conference room looked exactly the way I pictured it, too bright, too clean. It's that faint stale coffee smell lingering in the air. The blinds were half closed, casting these horizontal stripes of sunlight across the table like the whole scene was being sliced into neat little pieces. Rob was already there, along with someone from HR I barely knew. She had that professional smile plastered on, the kind that doesn't quite reach the eyes. On the table in front of them was a thin manila folder. I didn't have to guess what was inside. "Thanks for coming in," Rob said. Like I'd had a choice. They started talking. I say they because it felt like a tag team effort, trading off phrases like company restructuring and realignment of resources and difficult decision. Words that were meant to sound thoughtful but just ended up feeling empty. I barely heard them. My focus had narrowed to the smallest things. The way Rob kept glancing down at his notes, the HR rep's pen tapping lightly against the folder. The soft hum of the overhead light that suddenly seemed way too loud. It wasn't shock I was feeling. I'd already grieved this job in my head over the last few weeks. This was confirmation. Like watching a movie where you already know the ending, but you sit through it anyway, just to see if they get the details right. I nodded in all the right places. I didn't interrupt. Outwardly, I was calm, polite even, but under the table, my right hand was gripping the chair so hard that my knuckles had gone pale. When they finished, I asked if I had anything I wanted to say. I thought about it. I really did. I could have told them I saw it coming. Could have reminded them about the years I spent bailing out projects, the late nights, the weekends. But what would be the point? So I just said, I understand. Was it the HR rep slid an envelope toward me, severance details, paperwork to sign, the offboarding process? I slipped it into my bag without looking, and just like that, it was done. 12 years reduced to a 30-minute meeting and a folder in my bag. When I walked out, the rest of the office was buzzing like nothing had happened. People typing, phones ringing, someone laughing at a joke by the coffee machine. I wondered how many of them knew. It's probably more than I'd like to think. I didn't stop at my desk right away. I went straight to the restroom, locked the door, and just stood there staring at my reflection. I didn't cry, didn't even look angry. I just looked empty. Here's the thing they didn't know. I'd been preparing for this for months, not because I had some insider tip or psychic vision. Just instinct. That quiet voice in the back of your mind that says, don't get too comfortable. Most people ignore it. I didn't. Not this time. While they thought I was pouring my life into their spreadsheets and deadlines, I was also building something of my own. Late nights after work, I'd sit at my kitchen table with my laptop, a cheap desk lamp, and a cup of tea going cold beside me. Research, networking, setting up the framework for a side business I never told anyone about. It started small. A freelance project here, a connection there. But over time, it grew. Grew enough that when they finally slid that manila folder across the table, I wasn't staring into the abyss. I was staring at a runway. And I'd saved. Oh, I'd saved. Every raise, every bonus, every bit of overtime I could squeeze in, day. Thought my frugality was just me being boring. In reality, I was stacking bricks for a safety wall they couldn't knock down. I thought about all those mornings I'd walked into the office with my coffee, smiling politely at people who were probably already talking about my eventual replacement. And I almost laughed, because the version of me they thought they were firing didn't even exist anymore. The truth was, I'd outgrown them months ago. The only reason I was still there was strategy. I was letting them fund my transition, without even realizing it, and the satisfaction in that, the quiet, unshakable satisfaction was better than any angry speech I could have delivered in that conference room. They thought they were cutting me loose, but I'd already untied the knot. I walked out of that meeting with a manila folder in my bag and a mental list in my head. The next client I'd pitch to. The next step in scaling my work. The things I could finally do without asking for permission. They thought they were ending my story, but really, they were just clearing my calendar. The walk back to my desk felt longer than usual, like the hallway had stretched overnight. I passed coworkers without saying much. Some smiled, the polite, neutral kind. Others avoided my eyes altogether. A few looked like they wanted to say something, but didn't. That's the thing about offices. When someone disappears, the rest pretend it's just another Tuesday. My desk was exactly how I'd left it that morning. The computer's still on, eh? Half-drunk cup of coffee next to the keyboard. My mug, that faded company logo staring back at me like it was watching the end of an era. I grabbed a cardboard box from the supply closet, the kind meant for files, and started filling it. But the truth is, there wasn't much to pack. A couple of framed photos, a pen I liked, a few notebooks. 12 years of my life, reduced to a box that wasn't even half full. It was strange, seeing it all in one place like that. Not sad. Just small. I powered down my computer for the last time, the screen fading to black, the little whir of the fan slowing to silence. I could hear the hum of conversation from across the room, but it all felt distant, like I was already gone. As I walked toward the elevator, I glanced around the office one last time. The cubicles, the worn carpet, the flicker in the fluorescent lights over by accounting. It all seemed smaller now, like someone had turned the volume down on a space I used to think was the center of my world. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped in, set the box down at my feet, and watched the numbers light up in reverse. 12 years, counted down in seconds. When the doors opened to the lobby, I stepped out into sunlight. Cold air hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt light. Not the fake, polite kind of lightness you paste on for coworkers. Real lightness. The kind that comes when you realize you're free. I didn't look back. Not once. The first morning after, I woke up without an alarm. For 12 years, I'd jolted awake at 6:15, brain already buzzing with deadlines, emails, and meetings. But that morning, sunlight came in through the blinds, warm and slow, and for the first time in forever, I just stayed there. No rush. No clock dictating the rhythm of my day. I made coffee, not in a travel mug, not gulped down in the car, but in an actual mug, one that didn't smell faintly of print or toner. I sat at my kitchen table, the steam curling in the air, and realized how quiet my house was when it wasn't just a pit stop between commutes. By the end of that first week, I'd signed my first big client for my own business. A deal that would have taken months of approvals in the old job took a single phone call here. No chain of command. Now let's circle back. Yes, some victories were smaller, but sweeter, like taking a walk in the middle of the day. Without needing to clock out, or spending an entire Tuesday afternoon working from a coffee shop, laptop open, the sound of milk steaming and quiet jazz in the background. Money wasn't the fear I thought it would be. My savings had me covered. My new work was already picking up, and without the constant churn of office politics, I had more energy and more hours to put into things that actually mattered. But the best part? The quiet satisfaction of knowing they thought they blindsided me. They probably pictured me at home, panicking, sending out resumes in a frenzy. They had no idea I was already building something better before they even called that meeting. I didn't post anything about it online. No vague status updates about new chapters or exciting opportunities. My victory didn't need an audience. It was mine, quiet, certain, untouchable. It was months later when I happened to drive past the building. I hadn't planned it. I was taking a different route home from a client meeting, and there it was. The same glass facade, the same revolving door spinning slow in the afternoon sun. For a second, I almost didn't recognize it. It looked, not physically, but in the way places shrink when they no longer hold you. I slowed at the red light just long enough to glance through the windows. People were moving around inside, phones pressed to ears. Heads bent over keyboards, the same rhythm I'd lived in for over a decade. I felt like I was watching a scene from my old life, but the person in it wasn't me anymore. And here's the thing, I didn't feel bitterness. I didn't feel regret. I just felt distance. Like closing the cover on a book you once read every night and realizing you don't even remember the last chapter anymore. When the light turned green, I kept driving. Didn't slow down, didn't look back in the rearview mirror. The building disappeared behind me, swallowed by the city. I thought about the manila folder, the cold conference room, the box of belongings that wasn't even half full. And then I thought about the life I'd built since. The mornings without alarms, the freedom to choose my own pace, the quiet victories no one else saw. They thought they'd ended my story that day. But really, all they did was open a better door. And I walked right through it.